Ternyata suka berubah. Oh enggak. Satu, dua, tiga. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, we are from Group 1 and we are going to presentation about English history, part the foundation stones. The first material will be delivered by Dinda.
Okay, I'm going to explain the island section and Britain prehistory section. The first one is the island. The north and west are mountainous or hilly. The north is on average 5 Celsius cooler than the south. Much of the south and east is fairly flat or low-lying. This means that the south and east on the whole have better agricultural conditions. And what it means is Britain's climate is milder than most of Europe because the Gulf Stream brings water and warm winds from the Gulf of Mexico. The climatic differences between north and south and east and west affect agriculture conditions and crop yields. The south and east tend to have better agricultural conditions. Okay, the second one is Britain prehistory. 250,000 before Christ. Our first evidence of human life is a few stone tools dating from one of the warmer periods. This is evidence of human life in the 250,000 before Christ. 50,000 before Christ, a new type of human being seems to have arrived, who was the ancestor of the modern British. The arrival of modern humans around 50,000 years ago, modern humans began arriving in Britain who resembled modern Britons but were probably smaller and had shorter lifespans. 10,000 before Christ, as the Ice Age drew to a close, Britain was peopled by small groups of hunters, gatherers, and fishers. The hunter-gatherer period and climate changed at around 10,000 before Christ. As the Ice Age drew to a close, Britain was inhabited by small groups of hunters, gatherers, and fishermen. 5,000 before Christ, Britain had finally become an island and had also become heavily forested. Then, around 5000 before Christ, Britain became an island and heavily forested, which resulted in a nomad hunter culture due to loss of habitat and resources. 3000 before Christ, Neolithic or New Stone Age, people crossed the narrow sea from Europe in small round boats of bent wood covered by animal skins. Arrival of the Neolithic people around 3,000 years ago, Neolithic people first arrived in Britain, bringing significant culture changes such as agriculture, animal husbandry, and pottery. They settled in the western part of Britain and Ireland. Neolithic. Neolithic. These people kept animals and grew corn crops and knew how to make pottery. They were small, dark, and long-headed people. Changes in culture and power. The arrival of the Neolithic people was one of several waves of invaders before the first arrival of the Romans in 55 Anni Domini. Although they brought new ideas and methods, the changes in prehistory Britain were likely due more to local economic and social forces. Stonehat Scarabray. This Stonehat at Scarabray, Orkney, of the north coast of Scotland was suddenly covered by a sandstorm before 2000 before Christ. Public works and environmental change, large public works such as the construction of burial mounds or barrow, reflect how prehistoric Britain developed. Climate change also played an important role, such as in 1400 before Christ, when the land could no longer support many people due to a dry climate. Stonehenge. The precise purpose of Stonehenge remained a mystery, but during the second phase of building, after about 2400 before Christ, monument building after 2000 before Christ, people on the limestone plains began to build large circles of earthen banks and ditches, called henges. Stonehenge is one of the most spectacular examples of these henges, built in several stages over more than 1,000 years. The purpose of Stonehenge's construction remains a mystery. After 2400 before Christ, new groups of people arrived in southern Britain from Europe. They were round-headed and strongly built, taller than Neolithic Britons. Arrival of the new people. After 2400 before Christ, a new group of people arrived in southeastern Britain from Europe. They were round-headed and well-built, taller than the Neolithic Britons. Their their arrival was marked by the first individual graves equipped with pottery cups, which later became the origin of their name, beaker. The beaker people. Their arrival is marked by the first individual graves furnished with pottery beakers, from which these people get their name, the beaker people. The Beaker people, likely speaking an Indo-European language, the Beaker people brought one culture to the rest of Britain. They also brought skills to make bronze tools that began to replace stone tools. Stonehenge remained an important center until 1300 before Christ, with the addition of new circles and conic cross sections. Maiden Castle is one of the largest Celtic hill forts of the early Iron Age. Power shift, political and economic power shift to the Thames Valley and southeast England. Hill forts replaced fortress centers of local power, showing success in supporting more people in the region. Iron Age farms like these were established in southeast Britain from about 700 before Christ onwards. Iron Age farm is a type of farm that was established in southeast Britain from around 700 before Christ onwards. These farms were generally supported by iron tools and agricultural technology that was more advanced than in previous time. Iron Age farm societies tend to farm using iron tools, such as hoes and sickles, and more efficient irrigation and tillage system. This reflects the social and economic development of the society at that time, where agriculture became the main activity in providing food and daily life. The next part of the Celtic, the Romans, and Roman life will be explained by my friends Malika.
Okay, the Celt. Around 700 before Christ, these were the Celts, who probably come from Central Europe or further east from southern Russia, and had moved slowly westward in earlier centuries. The Celt know how to work with iron and could make better weapons than the people who used bronze. The Celt are important in British history because they are the ancestors of many of the people in Highland Scotland, Wales Island, and Cornwall today. The less Celtic arrival from Europe were the Belgic tribes. It was natural for them to settle in the southwest of Britain, probably pushing other Celtic tribes northwards as they did so. The Celtic tribes continued the same kind of agriculture as the Bronze Age people before them, but their use of iron technology and their introduction of more advanced ploughing methods made it possible for them to farm heavier soils. So this is the Stanwick horse mask shows the fine artistic work of Celtic Malta workers in about Anno Domini 50. However, they continued to use and build hill forts. The increase of this, particularly in the southwest, suggests that the Celts were highly successful farmers, growing enough food for a much larger population. The hill forts remain the center for local groups. The insides of these hill forts were filled with houses, and they become the simple economic capitals and smaller towns of the different tribal areas into which Britain was now divided. According to the Romans, the Celts were also very careful about cleanliness and neatness. As one Roman wrote, neither man nor woman, he went on, however poor, was in either region ragged or dirty. During the Celtic period, women may have had more independence than they had again from hundreds of years. She is Bodicea, the most powerful Celt to stand up to the Romans was a woman. In Anno Domini 61, she led her tribe against the Romans. She was tall, with long red hair, and had a frightening appearance. She nearly drove them from Britain, and she destroyed London, the Roman capital, before she was defeated and killed. Roman writers comment on the courage and strength of women in battle and leave an impression of a measure of equality between the sexes among the richest Celts. The Romans. The name Britain comes from the word Britanni, the Greco-Roman word from the inhabitants of Britain. The Romans mispronounced the word and called the island Britannia. The Romans had invaded because the Celts of Britain were working with the Celts of Gaul against them. The British Celts were giving them food and allowing them to hide in Britain. Under the Celt, Britain had become an important food producer because of its mild climate. It now exported corn and animals as well as hunting dogs and slaves to the European mainland. The Romans could make use of British food for their own army fighting the Gauls. The Romans brought the skills of reading and writing to Britain. The written word was important to spreading ideas and also for establishing power. As early as Anno Domini 80, as one Roman at the time noted, the governor Agricola trained the sons of Zeus in the liberal arts. The result was the result was that the people who used to reject Latin began to use it in speech and writing. Further, the wearing of our national dress came to be valued, and the toga, the Roman cloak, came into fashion. While the Celtic peasantry remained illiterate and only Celtic speaking, a number of town dwellers spoke Latin and Greek with ease, and the richest landowners in the country almost constantly used Latin. Julius Caesar first came to Britain in 55 before Christ, but it was not until almost a century later, in Anno Domini 43, that a Roman army actually occupied Britain. The Romans were determined to conquer the whole island. They had little difficulty apart from Boadicea's revolt because they had a better trained army and because Celtic tribes fought among themselves. The Roman considered the Celt as warm-eyed, high-spirited, and quick for battle, a description some would still give the Scots, Irish, and Welsh today. The Romans established a Romano-British culture across the southern half of Britain, from the River Humber to the River Severn. This part of Britain was inside the empire, beyond were the upland areas and the Roman control but not developed. The Romans could not conquer Caledonia, as they called Scotland, although they spent over a century trying to do so. At last, they built a strong wall along the northern border, named after the Emperor Hadrian who planned it. So this is Hadrian's Wall, was simple and intended to keep outriders from the north, but it also marked the border between the two later countries, England and Scotland. Eventually, the border was established a few miles further north. Effort to change it in later centuries did not succeed, mainly because on either side of the border an invading army found its supply line overstretched. A natural point of balance had been found. Roman control of Britain came to an end as the empire began to collapse. The first signs were the attack by Celts of Caledonia in Anno Domini 367. The Roman legion found it more and more difficult to stop the riders from crossing Hadrian Wall. Roman life. In some way, in some ways, life in Roman Britain seems very civilized, but it was also hard for all except the richest. This is the construction of a Roman kitchen about Anno Domini 100 shows pots and equipment. The most obvious characteristic of Roman Britain was its towns, which were the basic of Roman administration and civilization. Many grew out of Celtic settlements, military camps, or market centers. Broadly, there were three different kinds of town in Roman Britain, two of which were towns established by Roman culture. These were the colony, town people by Roman settlers, and the municipia, large cities in which the whole population was given Roman citizenship. The third kind, the civitas, include the the old Celtic tribal capitals through which the Romans administrated the Celtic population in the countryside. It is very difficult to be sure how many people were living in Britain when the Romans left. Probably It was as many as 5 million, partly because of the peace and the increased economic life which the Romans had brought to the country. The new wave of invaders changed all that.
Okay, that's all we can say. Please send question in the column provide. Thank you for your attention.
Wassalamualaikum
Wassalamualaikum
warahmatullahi
warahmatullahi
wabarakatuh.
wabarakatuh.